Hello again. This is Satan's Trilogy, and I'm reading Book 3, Chapter 1. This is reading number 73, and I am the author and the narrator. Sit back, relax, and let the story unfold. Brandy smiled and eagerly joined the others standing in the middle of a large empty warehouse. Brandy told Danielle and Tracy how great they looked, and then quickly told everyone else hello. Brandy didn't recognize the three young men and was surprised to see males in the group. Esther took a stance in front of everyone. "And Brandy wants to join us." Esther took a few steps. "And Brandy, you're wondering about the guys." Esther moved close to John. "This is John Campbell, his best friend Mike, and his brother Wes." Esther smiled at her aunt. "I have never mentioned John to you, but he is like a big brother." Esther was holding on to John from the side. "I am not certain why, but John has always had my back." Well, Esther smiled at John and kissed him on the cheek. Brandy wasn't a bit surprised with Esther's declaration. It seemed that Esther was constantly expanding the reach of her family. Brandy knew that Esther's judgment was always correct, and so she accepted any direction that Esther took her. "John," said Esther as she looked at him, "the next 3 days are dedicated to our new friends, Tracy and Danielle." John looked shocked. He turned to the twins and studied them. "Are you kidding me?" John stood speechless as he gazed at the twins. Esther quickly spoke up. "Tracy and Danielle are now employed by Bo Jackson, and so the girls are going Gothic." Esther waited for a response from John. John couldn't take his eyes off the twins. "Wow, I didn't even recognize you. You both look as beautiful as before, but now you're both wearing black." The twins were flattered by John's remarks and thanked him for the compliment. Esther was ready to instruct and spoke up. "All right, as I said, we have 3 days to dedicate to physically handling others. The twins are now entering the ring, where they will participate in some theatrics." Esther looked serious. "They are going to need some basic skills in how to maneuver others about at their will. This is done easily and relies on one very basic concept." Esther smiled at everyone. "That concept is pain." Esther stopped for a moment and then continued. "No one likes pain, and when placed into a position of pain, we try to remove it." Esther again smiled at everyone and then added, "This is how we control others." Esther took a step back. "We are going to be handling each other, and so first we must feel comfortable and trust each other." Esther stepped a bit forward and added, "We must trust each other during our training. I want to have each of us hug everyone. Please line up in one long line." Esther was the first on the left, and so Esther said, "Day, please begin by standing in front of the person next to you, and what I want is for the two of you to hug each other, then take a step sideways and hug the next person." Brandy was standing alongside of Day, and so Day stood in front of Brandy. "All right, everyone, let's do a real hug and move quickly." "All right," said Esther, "let's keep the line moving. And Brandy, please follow Day to the end of the line." "And guys," said Esther, "this is important." Everyone did as they were told. The line obviously didn't get longer, it just moved to the right as everyone followed the progression. Helen was the last person to line in line, and as she became the first in the line, Esther proclaimed, All right, Helen, everyone came to you. You have given everyone a hug without even moving. Perfect, said Esther. You have all touched each other. You have given each other a hug. This was all intended to make you comfortable with each other. Esther stepped out away from everyone to address them. I am the instructor, and this exercise does not apply to me. Esther smiled and added, in case you were wondering. Everyone was still standing in a line. I mentioned pain, said Esther. In our training, we must be controllers and we must allow others to control us. Tonight, you will learn 6 simple arm grabs that focus on nerve and joint positions. Each allows you to maneuver a person about with very little effort. Esther smiled and looked at John. John, please come forward. Esther continued to lecture. Doesn't matter if someone is stronger, taller, or more muscular than you. If you know the 6 movements I am about to show you. John walked to Esther and stood in front of her. While Esther continued to lecture, we are all in our street clothes, which is good. If you are ever in need of defending yourself, you can almost guarantee you will not be wearing anything but street clothes. Lesson 1, said Esther, as she turned her back to John. Attackers often come from behind. If John was a bad person intent on doing me harm, he might try grabbing me from behind and putting me in a chokehold. Esther was facing everyone as she asked John to put her slowly into a chokehold. John did as instructed and moved his right arm around Esther's neck. Esther was speaking to everyone. Come closer, and the elbow can be easily compromised by pushing your nail into the hollow area. And then you move the attacker's arm away while holding the elbow. Grab the wrist and push the thumb of the other hand to the center of the wrist. Esther was acting out her instructions. As you attack these 2 pressure points, you apply a slight amount of pressure, pushing the attacker's arm away from you. Turn towards them while you hold onto the arm. This will greatly hurt the attacker unless they drop to their knees and surrender themselves. As Esther completed the move, John quickly went to his knees. Esther had John on the floor, and he didn't dare move. If I choose to apply about 12 pounds of pressure on the elbow, it will dislocate. At that point, he should walk away from the attacker and avoid further conflict. You all need to understand, if someone attacks you, their intent is to hurt you. I will give you the tools to prevent any attacker from ever hurting you, but you must find the courage to not only defend yourselves, but to stop your attacker at any cost. Esther pulled John off the floor and said, we always help our training partner up. Never offer an attacker any mercy, for that is a weakness they will use against you. I will demonstrate this again, this time with my Aunt Brandy. Smiling at Brandy, Esther said, everyone must be an aggressor during lessons, and we must all be victims. 4 hours later, 6 lessons and countless movements by all, the evening was over. Esther stood tall in front of her extended family and said, excellent. You have all done well. Our first class ends with success. Everyone here has understood the 6 movements and how to react to any of 6 aggressive actions. Esther smiled as she stood in front of the exhausted group of friends. This was day 1. I was pleasantly surprised by my Aunt Brandy. that she did very well. I also was pleased that our youngest here, and I am speaking of Riley Grace, did very well. She held her own for the entire session. Esther glanced at Brandy and then Riley Grace as she continued. The evening was a success for everyone. Now it is my treat for a dinner well earned. I want to treat everyone at my uncle's restaurant, Chautaine Cuisine. He will serve all of us tonight. Esther seemed rather boastful with her comments. As we leave, I will reset the security alarm, said Esther as she continued to speak. The entry code is 54632. If you arrive before me tomorrow, you can gain access by entering 54632. Everyone arrived at the restaurant at the same time. Dave was driving Esther's Mustang. Raven and Riley Grace pulled in quickly on the Ninja that Raven had recently purchased from Esther's cousin. Gathering together outside, they then entered the restaurant. Together, Mr. Hung immediately spotted Esther entering the restaurant and moved to the front to greet her. Esther, it is so wonderful to see you. Mr. Hung was excited and gave Esther a hug, stepped back a bit and bowed to her. I have prepared our banquet room for you as you requested and everything is ready. I have personally overseen the preparations for the meal and all is ready. Business had more than doubled since Esther arrived the first time at the restaurant. Mr. Hung was certain that his good fortune was tied to his new niece. Mr. Hung led Esther to a new banquet room at the expanded left side of the restaurant. Esther and her party would enjoy a modest third of the space. Mr. Hung tried to greet all of Esther's party as they entered the room. Esther stood close to Mr. Hung and introduced everyone as they entered the room. As Day approached, Esther pulled her close, grinning with pride. She introduced Day as her sister. Uncle, said Esther, Day and I spend a lot of time together. Her father has also accepted me as his daughter. I am truly blessed, Uncle. Esther beamed with pride as she stood next to Day with her arm wrapped around her. Uncle Hung watched closely how Esther behaved and studied Day, then spoke. Day, this is very wonderful, for now I have two nieces. Mr. Hung hugged Day and smiled lovingly to her. I can see that you two have a very special connection. As Esther's sister, I would be honored if you called me uncle. I believe that sisters should have the same uncle. Day was almost speechless. She knew that Mr. Hung was highly thought of by all that knew him. Day grinned, looking Mr. Hung in the eye. I will be honored to call you uncle. Mr. Hung was pleased and said, And what is your last name? Day quickly replied, Ho. My father owns Ho's grocery store. Mr. Hung was pleased to hear this and said, Your father does a great service to the community. He is well respected. John was standing close by as the introductions were being made. Esther motioned him over. This is my big brother. He has been watching over me since I have arrived. John will graduate from Grant High with me at the end of the month. Mr. Hung realized that an African-American John would find it impossible to view a Chinese man as an uncle, and while Mr. Hung would have accepted John as family, he thought it doubtful that John could understand such a relationship. Mr. Hung put his hand out in front of John, and John shook his hand. You will always be welcome here. My niece is very special to me, and those she sees as special will be to me as well. Mr. Hung stepped slightly back and bowed to John. John seemed a bit confused. He said, Thank you, Mr. Hung. John did a slight bow to Mr. Hung and moved on to the tables. Within a few minutes, Esther had finished the introductions, and everyone sat at a long table, set up with the finest preparations offered by Chautauqua cuisine. And I believe I'll stop there. That's the end of reading 73. Hope you enjoyed it. So until next time, be safe and take care.